all up. Just gotta make sure it's centered and it should go in straight. It's lock or spacer, washer, nut. So here is a piece of 8 by 11.5 steel, and I'm going to make it into another one of these box type deals. Now you notice that the one side is an inch longer, or a half an inch longer, taller than the other side. Well, that's because when this is in the car, this is going to be welded in like this. You can see that right in here it's high and right in here it's low. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm actually going to have to trim this down and then cut it this way. Cut it this way, then trim it down, and then this will give me like kind of like a mounting flange, and I can bend this a little bit to mount it in, and then these will be flush. So this is kind of like so. So you can see that the tail light will actually sit in here, and then I can drill a hole or weld in some sort of a bung for a tail light. And then I'll put like a reflective, like either tin foil or some sort of reflective material inside this box. So obviously it needs to be welded up or whatever, and then I'll silicone it to make sure it's sealed. So basically all I did was started with this and then started laying out my measurements here. You can see that I went with 3 by 7.5, so it's 3 tall, 7.5 wide, 1.5 inches deep right here, plus a 1/2 inch flange, so that's 2. So you take 2 plus 7.5 plus 2, which is 11.5. Okay, so 11.5 wide. And then you do 3 plus 2 deep plus a 1/2 inch flange on each side. So 3 plus 2.5 equals 5.5 plus 2.5 equals 8. I don't know why I wrote down 7. Anyways, I have it cut at 8, so that's how that works. Now I have this laid out in my pattern, and you can see that I have to take this to the Beverly and cut off the corners, because when you make a box everything folds together. So just cut off these corners, and then I can take it and I can start my bends and my brake. so here I'm going to show you guys kind of how I'm laying out these brackets that I made. You can see that I made this bracket here, and I had to lay it out according to the measurements of this pedal system. What I'm going to start with first is I'm going to measure from one side to the other. That way I can mark my steel from one side to the other. It's more consistent that way. So what I'm going to do here, sticking this flange on and kind of eyeballing it, so to speak, from the end of the flange here to the center of this mounting hole. Now I want to make sure to hold it flat. It's 1.125 inches, so 1 1/8. Okay? And if you guys aren't familiar with these, this is a dial caliper. For something like this, it's not really that precise, so any dial caliper will work. So here, took it, marked it. Okay, there's your first line. Now your second line, you can do it a couple different ways. You can do the measuring from the flange, like I did on this one, and measure up to here, or you can measure from center to center of this hole. For something like this, I'm just going to do center to center of the hole and then add the 1.125 inches. So if I believe, or if I remember, this is 4 inches. Let's see. Yeah, 4 inches. So take a calculator. 1.125 plus 4. 5.125. I didn't need the calculator to do that, but anyways. So now, set this at 5.125. Okay, and I can lay out my next line. Alright, so now that I have that set up, I'm going to measure the width between these two, center on center, okay? So right here, 2.425 inches, okay? So 2.425, write that down. 2.425 inches. Okay, that tells you your width here, but it doesn't tell you how far from the edges you need to scribe. So what you gotta do now is you take your piece that you're cutting, your stock, measure it. This is 3.5 inches. Okay, so 3.5. And now you want your holes to be 2.425 inches apart. So you're gonna take 3.5 minus the distance that you want, 2.425, divided by 2. That tells you that each hole is going to be 0.537 inches from the end. So then you can take your caliper, you can set it to 0.537. Okay. Tighten down the screw. And now you can scribe your lines here too. Okay, now you have where these intersect. You can see right there, right here, and right here. Now you can center punch those, and if you really want to be accurate with it, you can do a cross measurement. So you can take center to center of the hole, or if you know the hole size, so in my case I know this is 5/16 hole, what I can do is I can measure outside to outside and subtract 5/16 of an inch. You can do it that way too if you want to be more precise. That's just more math. But so for this, I'm just getting it close because it's, you know, it can be, there's more tolerance on this than there is on some parts. Okay, so let's just say that's 4.675. Now let's check this and see if it's about close. Looks about right on the nuts. Okay, now check this way. Just make sure it's square also. You can see it's perfect, so I'm not worried. Now I just mark it, drill the holes, and it's good to go. And the reason I started measuring from this flange here, some of you guys may be wondering, on this brake setup, this, get a little bit better picture of this. This is the Wilwood brake pedal I'm using. This mounts up against the firewall, okay? And then this top here is another mount. So what I'm gonna do, pretend like this is the firewall. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have this mount that goes to the top also come and weld up to the firewall right here. And then it'll also come up and weld up to the cowl on the inside. So this gives me a point to triangulate this. So this way, it's gonna be held on right here, and vertically, it's gonna be held up by the cowl. So that's why I started 1 inch from the end with my measurements, laying this out. So. You can see I got these master cylinders mounted, well, kinda. They're just, everything's just kind of finger tight right now with the lock nuts. Before I tighten all this stuff up, I'm actually gonna have to bench bleed these. So to bench bleed these, all you gotta do is fill the cylinder about almost all the way full, and then you grab the plunger, put it in a vise, grab the plunger, and work it in and out until all the bubbles come out. You want a solid plug or some kind of a clear tube that comes up and back around and blows in. Clear because you want to see the air bubbles, or plug it because obviously you don't want the fluid going all over the place. So you want to build pressure in this, and then it kind of primes the whole system. I've done this before and I haven't done it before. The one truck I did do it on, the brakes were a little bit squishy, so I don't know if that had something to do with it or what, but Will would suggest that you bench bleed these, so I will do that, and then I can mount them and run the brake lines. A good feature about these twin master cylinders, you have, obviously it's just loose right now, but you have one master cylinder for the front and one master cylinder for the rear. Now, both of these master cylinders for me are 7/8 of an inch bore, but you can get different size bore. So say if you need more volume but less pressure in the back, say this is the back, then you'd want a 1-inch bore. Basically, pressure and volume work against each other. So if there's higher pressure, that means less volume, but lower pressure means more volume. So despite what people think, it's not always about having the biggest bore size. I remember when I used to shop for these, I used to think the bigger the bore size, the better, but that's completely inaccurate. So when you're looking at these, I just follow Will Wood's guidelines when I bought these. These are both 7/8 because I'm running disc in the front and the back. And then with this dual pedal setup, that allows me to adjust the bias between the front and the rear, because you usually want about 60% of your braking in the front and about 40% in the back. Basically, their lever takes the place of the like a proportioning valve. You can still probably run a proportioning valve if you'd like, but I like the bias bar. Also, they have a 2-pedal setup. So the 2-pedal setup is cool because you can actually control each brake, kind of like you have a clutch pedal, a brake pedal, and a gas, but it's gas, brake, brake. So you can control each one independently. What a mess. This tank got messed up when I put that red coat in. It actually pooled in one spot and it never really dried right. So I decided to take some acetone, clean it all out, and start over. This time I'll actually have this drain here, which I just drilled in the bottom side of the tank here to drain the excess out of, because before I was trying to get it out these holes here, and because this isn't at really the ideal spot for drain, it didn't really work out too well. So now I gotta redo it. Now that my fuel tank is finally finished properly as far as the coating on the inside and then repainting it on the outside, I have this mounting flange and the pickup set up. So I tighten this nut on with the lock washer, and I also put a couple drops of Loctite on there. And now what I can do is I can slide this in and get it in my little loop that's inside, and then I just use some black RTV, and it's setting up right now, and I'm using that for a gasket because this is a custom flange, so that'll work out. I'll just bolt it together and let it dry, and good as new. And notice how I still have the sender hole open, so I can look in there with the flashlight to make sure that my pickup hose is in my loop that I have in there. And then once this is done, I can actually put in the sender for good.